Monday, August 2nd, 2021. This is our afternoon meeting. First item on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
One item on the agenda today, and we'll see what else we can come up with under other items, but our partnership with Portland General Electric Pelton Round Butte project. This may be a Zoom, yes.
Yeah, commissioners, thank you. We've had PGE here several times in the past to provide just an update on what's going on with the Pelton Round Butte project, associated with which we are signatories to. So it's been important for them to kind of keep the board abreast of the latest developments. I think it was 2 years ago, perhaps, we heard from them about water temperature study that they were doing and associated with the new fish passage equipment and apparatus that they've established there. So I think they're prepared today to provide you a further update on the goings-on associated with the project and answer any other questions that you might have.
Great. So, we have a couple names here. Jim Mannion and Megan Hill may be available for joining us.
Yes, I'm Wendy Valise. I'm the local government affairs manager.
Hey, Wendy.
And I'm happy.
Yep.
We're super pleased to be here and provide an update. And the summary just provided was excellent. Thank you. I don't have to repeat it. With that, I do want to introduce Megan Hill, who will provide the presentation.
Great. So please stand by just one moment. So technology-wise, we have an introductory screen, it looks like up. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Welcome, and thanks for joining us. Now we're all seeing each other on video also.
Awesome. All right, Megan, take it away.
Okay. And I have a presentation. Should I go ahead and share that, or?
Yes, and we do have copies of it here, but please share it. So this Zoom is our recorded meeting, and anybody watching will be able to see the slides that way.
Is that working for you guys?
Here we go. Yes, thank you.
All right, so for those of you who haven't met me, my name's Megan Hill, and I am the Natural Resources Manager for Pelton Round Butte here in Madras, and I live here in Bend. So I'm going to give a high-level update of what we've been up to. So just a quick refresher, and you already got a bit of this, most of our work is based on our settlement agreement, which was reached in 2002 in Deschutes County, as well as local state government, federal, tribal, and NGOs like Water Watch and Trout Unlimited all came together and kind of set the terms and conditions for our license with FERC. And so that's a 500-page agreement, lots of details, kind of boils down into these 4 high-level items, generating power at the plant, providing recreational opportunities, returning sustainable harvestable runs of Chinook, steelhead, and sockeye to the upper Deschutes, and then watershed restoration to go along with that. As electricity generation, we are a pretty large project. It's about a 500 megawatt project, serves about 150,000 homes. In Central Oregon, we employ 46 employees. Most of those, of course, are supporting the generation of electricity. 12 of them work in my department on biological services and license compliance. And because of the things I'm going to talk about today, we are certified as low impact hydro.
Bless you.
Oh, yes, go for it. Oh, did I hear a question?
Oh, there was a sneeze, and there was a, just a moment over here. Yep.
You were blessing the sneeze.
Sounded like a question. No problem. So one of the main things that we do are recreation. So we support 13 facilities, our recreational facilities. They kind of range from hiking trails to full ground campgrounds like Pelton Park. The last year and a half, our focus has been, meeting the extra visitation we're seeing post-COVID and people discovering more outdoor hobbies, as well as adapting for increased wildlife preparedness, making sure we have good evacuation plans and that kind of thing. But we're pleased to see, increased visitation both last year and then this year in our parks. My main focus and our group's focus is on restoring Chinook, steelhead, and sockeye runs. Those fish were absent from the Upper Deschutes Basin for 45 years after construction of the dam. And currently today, we have 147 spring Chinook looking for spawning grounds and mates. We'd expect them to spawn in September, so pretty soon here. On one hand, that's our record. Our previous record was 56 adult Chinook above the dam. So we're pleased with that 147. It's also not our long-term goal by any means. Our goal is to get 1,000 fish per species returning every year. So we've got a long road ahead of us.
Question.
Now we do have a question.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
At this point, how many of the Chinook or steelhead are fish that were hatched out in hatcheries and planted in the streams, and how much are fish that were came from eggs that were laid in the Upper Deschutes streams and then grew up and went out and came back?
So at this point in the process, almost all of them are hatchery supplemented. So they're put out into the upper basin. They then come through the SWW at Round Butte Dam. We pass them downstream, but they do start their life in a hatchery still. We have some natural production, but not at levels that are producing like measurable adult returns yet.
Thank you.
Long-term goal, though, is to get away from hatcheries to where the runs are self-sustaining. So as I mentioned, 147 fish isn't going to get us there. Our run returns to date have been lower than our long-term goals. So we've been working as a fish committee, which is the group of state, federal, and tribal, as well as NGOs. There's 10 of those agencies that get together every other month at the project to kind of help guide our work going forward on reintroduction and water quality. And in 2019, we put together this high level plan for how we were going to improve reintroduction success, and particularly, getting more fish into the juvenile collector, the SWW, more adults back, and then, as you just mentioned, increasing the natural production to where they're spawning on their own and producing their own offspring. Don't have time to go through all these. If you go to the website, if you click on any one of those boxes, it brings up a one-page description of that strategy and what we're doing. I was just going to hit on three items: acclimation program, our efforts to improve fish habitat, and improve water quality. So acclimation is probably the thing I'm most excited about right now. This is a big collaborative program that's led by Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. This has to do with how we release the hatchery smolts. So when we started the program back in 2017, we just released them out of the back of the truck. And what we found is the fish were just booking it out of the stream. So they were only spending probably a few hours in the stream and then headed downstream. And so that really, we questioned, wasn't enough time for them to imprint on, say, Deschutes Creek, so that when they were adults, they knew how to find their way back and kind of imprinted on that chemical signature. So we looked at what other people were doing in other basins, and people were having a lot of success with acclimation facilities. So we've been over time increasing the percentage of fish that we acclimate. And acclimate just means holding them on river water for a couple weeks prior to release so that they can imprint on those signatures. So up here in the top left, you can see a picture of kind of an industrial looking acclimation facility. That is a tank loaned to us from the tribes that's operated by ODFW. It can hold about 25,000 Chinook. And Deschutes Creek just runs through it and out the other end. And we keep fish in there for a couple weeks and then let them go. The bottom two pictures are smaller scale acclimation site that PGE has set up. in Ochoco Creek, as well as in kids fishing ponds. So we built these net pens where we hold fish in the Camp Sherman kids fishing pond. And most recently this year, we expanded to the Prineville kids fishing pond. So it's been kind of a neat partnership because those are the times of year we're usually acclimating in March. When those fishing ponds aren't open. And so we're kind of double using that space, and it's a nice protected area where you don't have like the big flows that you could have on the tributaries themselves, but they're still getting imprinted on that water. So this is the first year we were able to get 100% of our fish, so 100,000 Chinook and 100,000 steelhead acclimated prior to release. The frustrating thing about all this is they're now out at the ocean, and so we have to wait 2 years until they come back to us to see how well it's working. Next up is water quality. Our water quality program has two major components. One is compliance with state standards, and then the other is sort of the science and management pieces. As far as compliance, we noted in our briefing materials that we're going through the process to modify our 401 certificate. And so kind of the very brief history there is that we have 401s from the state and the tribes that tell us how to manage to meet state standards in dissolved oxygen, pH, and temperature. And those were issued back in 2002. In 2004, the state standards for dissolved oxygen and temperature changed. And so what we've been doing every year with DEQ is getting an interim agreement to apply the current state standards, so what the standard is in 2021, rather than what the standards were in 2002. And rather than go through that annual process every year for the next 30 years, we're working on modifying the actual guiding 401 document. So that does involve a public process and a public hearing through DEQ, and is something that should be upcoming in the next month or two. And again, it's really just aimed at making those documents more current. The other piece.
I'm looking at the periphyton samplings. I never even heard that terminology. Can you explain that a little bit, or is that something you can talk to?
Yeah, so that has to do with the water quality. So periphyton is attached algae. So that's kind of the algae that's growing on the river bottoms. Okay. We recently completed the water quality study in 2019. We did a revision of it last year to reflect a laboratory error in how they estimated periphyton. It didn't end up changing the overall conclusions of the study as far as how we managed the project itself. It did change, what we understand about the algal community of the lower Deschutes River. The main focus of the study was to look at how we're operating the selective water withdrawal and our water blending with temperature in particular, to figure out if we are operating it in the best way possible when we consider kind of lower Deschutes River water quality, the reservoir water quality, and fish passage, and trying to make sure we're balancing all those objectives. It again is probably a 500-page report, so lots of details, but kind of summing it up, we are operating the project in a way that does balance those different objectives well. We looked at different blends, and we looked at things like building an algae curtain in Lake Billy Chinook to potentially hold back algae and not let it reach the lower river. That did have some nominal benefits to the lower river, but then it had major trade-offs when we looked at like the reservoir water quality, which is important for recreation, as well as fish passage. And so we tried to take that high-level look. One thing that, the study did point out was that we're increasingly sending downstream into the lower river nutrient-laden Crooked River water at a time at which the algae or the periphyton in the lower river can take advantage of it and grow. And so we have been trying to help address that by addressing sort of, the source of the problem, so to speak, by helping fund efforts in the Crooked River to improve water quality. We helped support the the Crooked River Water Quality Partnership, which is an effort by Crook County as well as the irrigators and the NGOs to kind of develop solutions to water quality on a local level. And then more recently, we've dedicated our Pelton funding to the Crooked River. And so the Pelton Fund is a $26 million fund that was established by the license that is funded by PGE and the tribes to help create better habitat conditions, because you can't do reintroduction with fish passage alone. You got to have the habitat for the fish. And so in 2020, we had about $6 million available to grant out, and we awarded $4.5 million of that and saved the remaining $1.3-ish million for the Crooked River, because we didn't have applicants at that time for the Crooked River that were well-developed projects. And so we're in process now of reviewing grant applications for that work. And the idea is that, not only do we have needs in the Crooked in terms of water quality, but also fish habitat. And most of the adults that are returning, most of the Chinook and the steelhead are headed to the Crooked River. And thanks to Deschutes Valley Water District's Opal Springs project, they're now able to access that habitat. And so we want to make sure it's in good shape for them. So I'm excited to see where that leads.
Megan, it's Commissioner Adair. I have a question for you. You said the goal is to get 1,000 per species, but I was wondering, what is the count currently today of the steelhead and the sockeye then? If we know the Chinook count, are those numbers captured also?
Yeah, so we can definitely send you, the counts over time. The Chinook are the only fish that are returned today and spawning today, so that's why I included them. Sockeye return in July and August. Currently, we have 2 fish back as of last week. That's hopefully just the beginning of the run. It's a tough year for sockeye with drought conditions and warm conditions throughout the basin, but hopefully we have more coming. Those have ranged from numbers in, the dozens up to our record year was 540 sockeye, but we only saw that once in 2016. Likewise, steelhead have bounced around, typically around 50 fish returning per year. I think we've had over 100 a couple of years, but again, lower, and those would start returning this September and return through May.
I used to actually live on a little teeny stream in Woodinville, Washington, that had salmon that would come and spawn in this teeny stream. And it's really unfortunate, I don't know which kind, but I just remember it was really an amazing, to see that in this small stream that they actually got there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're amazing for sure.
Yeah, the memory, I love how you're saying they're, to be imprinted and to actually be held in the water seems to, that sounds like really beneficial for your project.
Yeah.
Megan, you were talking about how the majority of the fish are going to the Crooked. Can you give us a sense of proportions on that? And does it vary from species to species? I mean, obviously the sockeye are mostly going up the Metolius, but the other species, the Chinook and the steelhead, are they spread among tributaries, or what's the makeup there?
Yeah, and I don't have the exact numbers, but it's a little higher percentage for steelhead, but for both Chinook and steelhead, it's 55 to 70% of the returning fish are going up the Crooked. So the higher is steelhead, because we really don't have any steelhead production historically out of the Metolius. So, an even split would maybe be 50-50. So they're closer to 70% going up the Crooked. And then for Chinook, you mainly see them going up the Metolius and the Crooked, but again, probably 55% going up the Crooked and a few up the Deschutes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the update. I know that sometimes there's field trips and tours, so keep us in mind. There's been invitations that I haven't been able to respond to, but I appreciate knowing that there's activities, and I sure would like to join you sometime just to see some of the activities that are happening. I think about 10 years ago, I was able to carry a 5-gallon bucket of smolts down to the Wachus Creek and put them in the river. So I wonder what happened to those, but I mean, we've been trying to do this for many years.
So what about the water temperature, though? I remember from a couple years ago that we were talking about temperature, and I was wondering if you had anything to report today?
Yeah, so this year in particular, with having record temperatures, has been challenging. The whole effort of our water temperature program is to restore seasonal without project temperatures, and so we've been successful in that in terms of shifting the peak temperatures from July into shifting them from August and September into July, which is what they were historically before the project was built. And so that is in line with EPA recommendations for kind of providing cooler temperatures in that late summer, fall period when we see the most number of fish migrating through, and in particular fall Chinook. This year, our temperatures at the project peaked at about 62 degrees. That's when it was about 116 in Madras. So they remained fairly cool, but it's still one of the warmer years for our temperatures at the project, just due to it being a rough year. And we're continuing to look at the flow situation as well, because our flows are lower than they've been before, and make sure that we're watching that and looking at the low flow triggers in our license to potentially augment if needed for fall Chinook this fall.
Thank you so much.
Great.
I did want to add that, go ahead.
Oh, I also wanted to ask about the volume of water you're working with. So we've had, we're having a significant drought year this year. We had somewhat of a drought year last year as well. And I know that, the way that would affect the volume of water you're dealing with in the reservoir is different than the way that, farmers experience it here. I mean, the HCP is requiring more water to be left in stream, and which is having an impact on agricultural supply. But with the drought, agricultural supply is way down. So I'm just curious whether, with all those factors, whether in net you're ending up with a lot less water in the reservoir, or whether it's the reservoir still ends up pretty full, or how that all plays out.
Yeah, so our reservoir did fill this year. So we are not in the kind of similar situation that you're seeing upstream. We are run of the river. And so we kind of pass downstream within 10% of what comes into the project. And so we don't have sort of the same types of storage as you see upstream. We've certainly seen changes with HCP, I think, in terms of the timing of when water's coming downstream, and it's still pretty early to understand kind of, long term, especially since the first year the HCP was sort of this extreme drought condition, to know how that will impact the project. But for the most part, we're run of the river. There are provisions for if we get below 3,000 CFS that we would have to draw down Lake Billy Chinook by about 4 feet. And we've never had to do that, but it's something we're looking at really closely right now, because we're at about 3,300. So getting closer than is comfortable for sure. But hopefully that answers your question. We're not in the same situation that you're seeing up at Wiki up in Prineville by any means, because we are just run of the river for the most part.
And I'm curious whether the volume coming down the tributaries is like from far up the tributaries is accounting for that, or that for that kind of similar amount over time, or whether it's how much does do springs way downstream, close to the reservoir, contribute to the inflow of the reservoir versus, water that originates way up in the headwaters?
Yeah, the springs are huge. So Opal Springs, I can't remember what the CFS is there, but it's a big contributor. And the springs in the Crooked River Canyon, certainly the Metolius, we have the benefit of that pretty steady stream flow. And then there's about 600 CFS of ungauged tributaries and mainly springs coming in at the reservoir themselves. There's several springs like within the reservoirs. And so I think those do play a huge factor in terms of sort of creating more stable conditions once you add the Metolius in particular and those Crooked River springs.
Okay. Thank you.
Great.
I just before we end here, I did want to introduce you to the senior plant manager at Pelton Round Butte, Chad Croft. If you could show your video, Chad, if you're able to, that would be great. He's a member of the PGE team and again, works hand in hand with Megan. And certainly if there's interest for touring or, bringing in a group to come see the facility, then certainly Megan or Chad could help facilitate that option. There you go, Chad. There, I can see you now.
This is your 15 minutes of fame. Thanks for joining us.
Sorry for joining late.
Thank you so much for having us. We're so appreciative that you allowed us to come and speak today. We know you have very busy schedules, and so we're so appreciative. If you do have any follow-up questions, Sharon, who is extraordinary, you were very lucky to have her. Feel free to have Sharon send me an email, and I'll get it to Megan and Jim and Chad if there's any other follow-up questions.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for the update. This is a long-term partnership and relationship, so it's great to see you, everyone.
And I'm glad to hear that your reservoir was full. So a little better news than some of them.
Yep. Great.
That old groundwater will hold out for a while, at least.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
Well, and thanks staff for finding that date. I know that was talked about for a while. We just wanted to do it, so we were able to get that scheduled. And a good conversation today and a current update on the status of water quality, temperature, volume, flow, and making electricity. Okay, other items?
Commissioner, I think Nick's here to discuss Planning Commission appointment in the South County region.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Nick Levac, Community Development Director. I provided some information to you last week, the applications and the materials from the interviews that we had with two candidates, and Planning Commission Chair Les Hudson, Board Chair Commissioner DeBone, and myself. We interviewed the two candidates for the position. Both interviewed very well. And we unanimously recommended Tony Williams, who's lived in southern Deschutes County for about 20 years and visited since the 1970s, as she shared with us. And I provided a copy of her, again, her application and her letter of interest. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I do have it here available if you are interested in reviewing it. And so it's a discussion for the board to either we could either direct us to bring it back for a formal board appointment at a subsequent meeting, or you may be able to have even a minutes motion today. I would defer to Dave on that, but it's really your call.
So the first step is, this is a recommendation of the effort that I went through. So, we've done this before where if you'd like, you could have an opportunity to interview also. So, which is, that's the first step of this process. Or if you'll take the recommendation from the committee that the three of us put together, Ms. Williams really engaged, very energetic. She's all over the community and the county. She's a resident and a small business owner, so she's all over the place. So I was really pleased, as I say, but both candidates very engaged, very motivated to be, community service, jumping in on a planning commission. Both of them had that attitude of wanting to provide community service and be engaged.
Excellent. Oh, it was unanimous.
Well, as I say, for the three that were involved.
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for both of them for applying.
Yeah. Any thoughts?
Seems like a workable process.
Okay. So it looks like, yeah, recommendation made and received. So at this point, is a minutes motion today or a future meeting? Either way.
Do it that way, certainly. In the past, we've just brought them back and put it on your
Yeah.
consent agenda at a later meeting, but
Yep.
whatever your
We go
pleasure
on
is.
Wednesday's agenda then, or is it too late for that? Yes, isn't it?
Yeah, when's the next planning commission meeting?
The next planning commission meeting is on August 12th, but she shared with us that there's only a couple of dates over the next couple of years she can't make it, and next week is one of those. So time is not of the essence.
Yeah.
So if it's whatever the board is comfortable with.
Well, yeah, so let's put it on a future board meeting, but we can acknowledge that, yeah, the board is willing and able to accept that nomination, and we'll be proceeding, so you can let her know that. And then we'll just put the welcome letter on a future meeting. There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for following through with that process.
Next one, you were asked, Commissioner DeBonne, to sign a letter last week in support of a TGM grant application to the state for some master planning work in the central area of La Pine, the new neighborhood area. Because of a timing, we asked you to sign that. We didn't have a meeting last Wednesday because of the fair opening, so this would be to kind of...
Yeah, so acknowledging that. So, yeah, there's a letter, it's a letter of recommendation and support for the city of La Pine to DLCD for a technical assistance grant in support of a new neighborhood planning effort for, which is county-owned land. So this would be the moment, I'll make a motion of support, since I already signed the letter, if there's support for that, and you can acknowledge the letter that we had, so there's a copy of it.
And Commissioners, I would just acknowledge that the letter is very similar to the one that we signed last year, so it wasn't, because of the similarity, we didn't feel that it was going to pose too much of a issue to present, to redraft essentially the same letter and just have the chair sign it.
Now, did we ask for 250,000 last year?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. So, okay, well, maybe we have a better opportunity to actually get a grant then for the 175,000. I know it's extremely competitive, and I guess we learned there were a few things that we could do better, so hopefully La Pine will be granted that.
Yeah. So as I say, I have made that motion since I
Okay.
already signed it, so just...
Well, I'm just
acknowledge
saying, yes.
it. So is there a second?
75, I'll second it.
Okay, yeah.
I would love to see it.
Oh, okay.
And it's been signed already, so.
Yep. As it's just one. Okay, so calling for the vote, is there any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Dare.
Yes.
Commissioner Chang.
Yes.
And Chair votes yes. So that's for the minutes. So then the follow-on concept there is, remember, I think we have already discussed the fact that it would be time to proceed, kind of, if that comes through or not. As in, is there a relationship with the city of La Pine where and from a board point of view, would we want to give a little bit more direction to this, as in, if the city of La Pine needs resources to do code changes or code review, would we want to possibly partner and fund either reimbursement from those dollars or reimbursement from future sales? So that would basically just empower us to know that we're going to move forward one way or another. As I say, this is a policy decision at this point, and maybe, Tom, if you can help me clarify better. I just want to make sure that we're not standing by twiddling our thumbs waiting just in case somebody helps to pay for something, that if there's action, that it's going to happen,
Commissioner, there appears to be some motivation with the city to want to do some master planning efforts there to chart their future and have a vision for what that central area of the city might look like. We've had some difficulty in the past in kind of struggling when people have approached us to purchase land, which have been kind of one-offs on whether that those concepts that have been presented to us kind of fit within the overall long-term vision for what ought to go in that middle portion. So we've advocated for some time to have at least some kind of framework so we can assess land purchase requests or other development requests that come to us as the property owner, whether that fits within the vision. So having some clarity, I think the city certainly has embraced that concept now also, and would like to work with us to kind of establish that vision, whether it's a $175,000 or $250,000 very detailed, very comprehensive master plan, or even just a simpler framework. I think there's different ways to accomplish what it is we're seeking in terms of having a path forward, a vision for that land. So Christie has had conversations with the city manager in La Pine, and I know Commissioner Bowen has spoken to the mayor about that. So we don't have an ask in front of you today. We don't have a precise dollar amount for a specific project should this grant application not go through and we're unable to fund at least the overall detailed master plan study that's contemplated as part of the grant application. But there may be some other things that I think would lend itself very well to a joint meeting with the city council to explore what those alternative options might look like in terms of hiring some expertise to do some visioning, or kind of like a planning charrette that Nick and Peter Gutowski have experience with in CDD to kind of throw some different concepts out there with local stakeholders to come up with a vision or a draft vision or two for that land, which are all potential concepts or ideas that gets us closer to having a longer term vision for that land. So it may be a while before we hear on the TGM grant, so we can are certainly willing to further those conversations that we've had with the city on what those options might be, and I think we're probably due for a joint meeting with the city council, which we could work to kind of scope something up as an agenda discussion for that meeting.
Well, and that would be helpful. So if we put it on an agenda item for a joint meeting, then there'll be preparation for that agenda item, and then we can kind of clarify how we're going to proceed from there. So I'm just letting you know, I'm motivated to, start to move, whatever that looks like. And as I say, we know that there's value there and there's willing, developers. We've already been approached for, somebody wants to basically, pre-commit us to sell them something, and they'll help us plan it too. So, that was one of the concepts. So there's the markets out there.
But we're not talking about spending money prior to receiving an announcement of this grant competition.
Well, I'm pointing out that if it's the will of this board that we're going to proceed with or without those dollars. So with those dollars, the state will help us pay for planning. But if it doesn't come, somebody's going to proceed. The market's push. There's pressure out there right now. So why wait for a grant announcement? And I'm not offering specific amount right now. Just like Tom said, I don't have a proposal. I'm just, what's the willing of the board? That's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
I guess what I'm asking about is many grant programs say that if you expend dollars on your project prior to award, then they're not eligible for reimbursement anymore. So I'm trying to understand whether we're talking about, because and there's a lot of stuff that you can do, developing a request for proposals, running a solicitation, all that. That you could still do all that stuff in the time while you're waiting for an award announcement, but if the grant does come through, we don't want to preclude ourselves from being able to be reimbursed.
It seems like that grant didn't take that long to find out the answers.
Yeah.
It's pretty fast, isn't it? Maybe even September or something? I don't,
Could be.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And I do believe we hopefully learned a lot with last year's application, so maybe we will be successful. But yes, I hear what you're saying, and Lapine is really the location for a lot of new home construction, so whatever we can do.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that I'm not supportive of moving forward, whether the grant comes through or not. I'm just trying to figure out the schedule of what we would be doing when to not
I mean, there's-
impact our ability to use the grant funds if we get them.
And yeah, so I guess, and that was my thought is, let's start doing anything and everything. And fine, I mean, let's not go spend money that we could get reimbursed for and disqualify ourselves for that. But let's not wait for the grant either and wait to find out if we're funded or not. Let's start to do whatever we can do.
So we
I
would
think we
sort-
should set up the meeting. I think that's the
Yeah.
most important thing to do today, to set up that meeting. We're maybe perhaps meeting with Bend City Council on the 2nd of September, so hopefully there'll be some time in there that we can set up that meeting, just to get together.
Before September 2nd, so, because this is the beginning of the,
Yeah, I know, if we have time the
So
next couple weeks.
3 weeks from now, maybe?
Yes,
Or if that's even,
that's a possibility. Maybe they could come up today, right?
come.
No, I mean, it's too
Well,
bad
whatever,
we don't
we'll
have
see.
more-
As I say, I'm not here to put too much structure to it. I was just making sure we're leaning into it instead of waiting. That's really the only concept I was trying to.
No, I think it's excellent. Let's get together with them ASAP.
I mean, it seems like the most important thing is for us to identify what dollars we're going to use to pay for this if the grant doesn't come through. And
And this is for the city's planning efforts.
yeah, but it's for our land. I mean, and this will, because I mean, are you all anticipating that the city would pay for it, or are you anticipating that we would pay for it? I mean, I would guess that.
Just trying to let staff, take a position that we're moving forwards today instead of waiting for a response from that. Maybe that's all we want to do.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
because I don't
mean,
have
so-
much more clarity either.
Yeah, no, so I mean, maybe that means, yeah. I'm already jumping ahead to like what are the nuts and bolts of that? But I guess if just kind of giving staff direction to move full speed ahead with an understanding that as needed, we will figure out a way to pay for this. I mean,
There'll be decision points along the way.
okay.
Does that help? I mean, just kind of, yeah. So there you go. Thank you. I think we got to what I was looking for too. Okay.
Commissioners, I had one last item. I sent you all a note on Friday, last week, Thursday or Friday. We've been scoping potential homeless camp in the Redmond area per the board's previous direction, and would like the city of Redmond's help in doing some preliminary planning, scoping, answering some initial questions. And so I prepared a letter that for the commission to send to the Redmond City Council that formally requests that assistance from the city, not committing any dollar amounts or any land or anything else. It's just asking for their involvement in seeing what's possible and doing some preliminary scoping with particularly from the city's perspective with respect to land use regulation, zoning, utilities, traffic, and so forth. So you've got, I think, a draft in front of you. There's initial.
Now, I don't have a copy of it. I know you gave me one earlier today, and it went into a different pile.
I did
Oh,
bring
yeah,
one.
okay, good. So
I didn't.
two of us are in that spot, yeah.
I didn't bring mine down, but I read it. And I think it looks
I
good.
just had a question.
Thank you so much.
Tom, in Redmond alone, more than 200 people, does that include the people out in Antler too? The county property out east of town, that 200 number?
Yeah, Commissioner, that number came from the city. I'm not
I know,
sure
I know.
exactly what it includes. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I did talk with Colleen Thomas today, and we did come up with a number that we believe there's 1,500 homeless in the county. So that was her number today. Just for appoints. So this 200 looks fine. I actually prefer your letter, the potential modification one that you give to us.
I do as well.
So, content-wise says, we are motivated to discuss the development of a managed camp facility / village on county property within the Redmond city limits. So it may be and/or village, so it kind of includes, instead of just a slash is what I'm thinking, as one specific feedback. Because the definition of these things is still to be determined, as in we're using words, we haven't seen it on the ground, and what might be in anybody's head when you hear the words could be very different. So this is, it's going to be tricky right now. The terminology is going to be interesting.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, and we don't have a finalized vision of what this might look like. That's the purpose of these initial discussions, is to see what's possible and see what might be doable. Is it possible to accomplish all that in one location, or would it be either necessary or practical to have different sites for different types of uses?
Well, as I say, and the version 1 of something that we put on the ground is going to probably, as soon as you say, okay, let's start this, there'll be a version 2 right behind it, as in, this didn't work last night, so tomorrow it's going to be different. So, as I say, it's going to be a step, evolutionary process, and what are we even doing here? So, also, I'd like to promote to kind of engage staff towards solutions, and then mentioned match our investments second. So just kind of turn that sentence upside down. Because being able to communicate and, as I say, just terminology definition and, sketching out something on a napkin at this point in time and say, does this look reasonable, is different than even having to pay for it. So I'd like to, ask that engagement with the staff, planning, land use, is authorized. And then, we can also say, please join us in our investments. It's a little bit of wordsmithing.
That's fine. I mean, I think the encouragement to consider co-investing with us is really important. But if it goes first or second, I think that's fine.
Just the way I view it. Yeah.
I mean, but most importantly, both the board and the Redmond City Council got to hear about some very well-formulated proposals over the last weeks and months, kind of envisioned within the city of Redmond. And I see this letter and kind of this ask as being, a first baby step forward in hopefully a partnership between the county and the city to make some things happen that are going to put a dent in the homelessness challenge in our region. So if this is an extending of the hand, I'm really excited to see us do that.
It's not only to make things actually better for them, but also safer for our community this year. I think that with our drought conditions and the number of fires that have started in Deschutes County, we desperately need to move the homeless to safer locations so that we're not, we are on constant alert, honestly. I don't know if we'll get out of it unless we have a really wet winter, but it's really been, the fires have been overwhelming, so.
Yeah, it'll be better for those people experiencing homelessness, and better for everyone else in the community if they're in a managed setting, a planned, managed, authorized setting.
So
Okay, we'll make those modifications. If you'd like to bless that concept that
Yeah,
you
so-
modified, then we'll
Is there a motion to send this letter, as in we'll see the final version formatted?
I move that we approve and sign and send this letter to the Redmond City Council.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
Commissioner Adair?
Yes.
And chair votes yes. Great, thank you.
I did want to acknowledge that the Bethlehem Inn shelter is a high barrier shelter, and I do believe that that's a good way to go. So I thank Bethlehem Men for stepping up with their program.
So at this time, we'll take another 45 minutes or so and debrief from the county fair. No, I'm joking. So.
Oh, I do have one.
Yeah, I know, there's all kinds of stuff we've been doing this week.
Okay, I do want to say, in between 1.25 million with the auction for our 4-H and FFA
Great.
kids in the county, plus add-ons. So perhaps up to as much as 1.5, but sitting in that room, seeing people that were raising their paddle to buy a steer that's going to cost them up to $10,000, and that wasn't the grand champion, is an enormous investment in the youth. And I, as a 10-year 4-H'er, I know what it meant to me. It helped put me through college. So I really thank those businesses. It hasn't been easy on a lot of those. I mean, a lot of those have struggled to get through the last 18 months, and it was an amazing support. So thank you, Candy, thank you, Jeff. Yes, and definitely we were shorthanded in many spots, but the rodeo was really full. It was slammed on Saturday night. Everything was full. So thank you.
Yeah, any thoughts or observations?
I'm really glad that we were able to have that community event and community gathering. That means it has a lot of meaning to so many people, and it's just a lot of different ways to enjoy yourself and connect with your community, and so I was very excited to participate in the fair this year.
And I very much appreciated just being out there, seeing everybody. A lot of, majority by far was outdoors, so we were really trying to, keep it safe in time of COVID. It is that awkward time where it's kind of on the verge of not knowing if it's going to be coming back. The numbers going up, but everybody was having a good time. I want to thank the vendors that were there. Everybody was understaffed. You could see it, and temp agencies weren't quite available at the levels we wanted also. So a lot of hard work by dedicated individuals, but everybody had a good time also. The businesses that helped bid the animals up for 4-H'ers and FFA were just wonderful. Thank you so much for all that out there. And just the social time, I was out in the back all week with the families and the kids, the 4-H'ers and everything, and the social time with the kids, just the camaraderie of the community out there was very important and valuable, instead of just doing everything remote, just for the young childhood development opportunities that we saw out there. And seeing just the whole cross-section of humanity coming through the gates. What a great time all week long. So, okay.
I watched a lot of the pig judging because only
Yeah.
briefly showed a pig when I was in Grand Championship. And, there's a real art to it. And how do you keep your pig happy? So I'm hoping next year.
Without, smacking them hard.
Yeah,
and
like,
making
please,
red
don't.
marks. Yeah.
But next year, I actually mentioned this to Tom, I think we need to improve the air conditioning system for the swine barn, because even with fans above them, a lot of those pigs looked incredibly hot. So anyway, I think.
It's always like that.
Commissioner, you also told me we need bacon next year. So
Oh, bacon, yes, for the employee breakfast, I go truly bacon. I mean, there's so many things I only eat with
Recook
bacon.
those pigs, huh?
Yeah,
Oh, my goodness.
yes, well, yeah, I think bacon's really.
Well, and so then, this was basically the project since, last year didn't even happen. There was definitely some animals and auction
we had the
last year.
auction
Yeah,
it was
animals and
great.
auction last year, but the numbers were down this year, and that's probably artificial. So, I mean, we could probably see a lot more activity if the economy is opening up and people are more comfortable too. So we got to even plan for bigger
Well,
fair events.
I mean, grain is so expensive now. I buy some grain sacks, 50 pounds, and it's $34 a bag, unless you can find a special deal. So you really have an enormous investment if you've been grain feeding your steer for months.
Yeah,
It's so definitely, maybe they're getting 10,000, but their profit is impacted by the price of grain. Apparently, corn now, because of the ethanol, corn, I said the other day, Umatilla County is full of cornfields now because it's up to, what, $7 a bushel or something? It's huge. So, and that costs more to feed your animals.
Okay, anything else? Any other items?
The one other thing I'd mention is that the Oregon MPO Consortium met last week, and I participated in that meeting. They went over their legislative policy goals for the year, and that document would be available if anyone wants to see it. There was also a really extensive conversation about rail crossings for roads, for paths and trails and things like that. And I'm not tracking any particular proposals right now where we're running into challenges with crossing Burlington North and Santa Fe, but I know that it's been a thing in the past. So WIKIYIP is on timeout, right, until.
Well, so let me just follow up. Yeah, pardon me for stepping in, but ODOT is doing the parallel, 4-lane road efforts right now down to the end of the forested land, the federal land down there. So my thought is, once they get that project done, hopefully WIKIYIP will just be scheduled to come back online. So if it ever comes around, go ahead and mention that, it's like when they put it back in the STIP, because I got to imagine they can, if the intention is there and it's funded, they can design whatever the solution needs to be done. Now that we know what the problem was, because you could just put different footings in or make it float and not sink, or there's design options there, but X amount of money, who knows how much.
Yeah.
But sorry, to get back to the MPO.
So the MPO folks I think they were mostly dealing with problems where, they're trying to bring a path to the rail
Urban.
and then literally cross it, as opposed to go over or under, or the kind of large engineered solution that we'd be dealing with with Highway 97. But still, there was a lot of very useful and valuable experience among that group. So, but as we hear about other rail crossing, questions, there's people to call on to kind of give us some background.
Can't just push a button for a walkway, rapid flashing beacon to stop the train, I guess. Yeah.
No, the rails, the rails were kind of, they were given rights and property a long time ago. So it's pretty hard to kind of, essentially butt in on their corridor.
Once you get that much mass moving, you probably don't want to stop it, and it costs a lot of money to stop it too.
Yeah.
So makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, the other industry, though, that's incredibly impacted at the moment is truckers. There's not enough truckers. People aren't getting, talk to restaurant owners. They're not getting their food supplies from trucking. That industry, you see interesting things that are not on the grocery shelves now.
Well, at least the corn dog supply showed up at the fair, though, right?
They were fabulous. Loved my corn dog.
Yep.
Yes, one, at least one a year, right? I don't think I had one last year.
Just Kathy had to split one.
We had to split one last year.
Anything else?
Sounds good.
Yeah, exactly.
There was the Emergency Homeless Task Force meeting also last week with the City of Bend, but I think you all have got some briefing about that already.
Yeah, Tom's sharing because he's there with you, so he shared some information. So one of my thoughts is currently with the managed camps and the different efforts that are going on, understanding who's going to be an operator, as in if we have a managed camp, there's service providers, there's community services, but then, the operator, the person that, or entity that, is just kind of the manager, the person that's the first line of observation and coordination.
Yeah.
So that's going to be some actions that everybody's going to be involved in that here in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
Who's operating? Anything else from you, Commissioner?
No, thank you.
Okay, that's all I have. Seeing nothing else, meeting adjourned.